Well, today certainly is going to be quite a big crunch day, especially when it comes to, shall we say, our future relationship with the EU, as well as probably, certainly with Ireland and probably America as well. As today is the day that Boris Johnson is putting on the table MPs' allowances to make changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, as we've said numerous times before, Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, and indeed particularly the Brexiteers and the DUP, cannot do this by themselves. They have not negotiated this. They have not triggered Article 16, which is something that, Frosty was constantly banging the drum about, saying, I'm going to trigger Article 16. But of course, we don't really know what the outcome of today is. It may not pass. I suspect there might be quite a credible backbench rebellion today, given the fact that you have a lot of backbench MPs who are against this. You saw the 148 MPs who obviously voted against Johnson in a vote of no confidence. Today we will see if the plan of action, as we spoke about before, whether they just plan to try and stymie up Johnson and just muddy down his agenda until he goes, or at least they somehow make some sort of significant concessions against Johnson, maybe. We don't really know. But before we go on to talk about Boris's new cunning plan for the EU, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And also down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way, as well as the new subscription button, where you can help subscribe to the channel that way, and you get little bells and whistles and all sorts of badges and emojis that you can use on the channel. And of course, there is the thank you button as well that can help support the channel that way. So thank you very much to everyone who does help support the channel. And of course, even thank you to the people who just hit the like and share buttons. So, as we said earlier on today, this is a big day. But this is just part of potential more clashes that Boris Johnson is ultimately going to be involved with, certainly against the EU. And why is he doing this? Well, of course, it's partly to re-rally the Brexit core voter audience that he had. Those northern Brexit voters and those southern Brexit voters very differently want very different things want very pardon me, they want very different things when they, shall we say, go to the vote ballot, when they go to, shall we say, when they go into that ballot box to vote for different things. Very ideologically different, but one thing they are united on is, of course, Brexit. And of course, Johnson knows to win the next election, or at least to have any hope of at least staying in power, he has to maintain that north-south Brexit coalition that he managed to create back in 2019. But really, since then, ultimately has fallen apart. The two massive by-election losses in Tiverton and Houghton and Wakefield are exact examples of that Tory nightmare happening, both losing the Red Wall as well as the Southern Wall down south. This does not bode well for them, especially at a potential next general election. So what have you got to go and do? Well, if you're Boris Johnson, you've got to go and, shall we say, rally the troops. Let's go put out some policies, which, again, are very ill thought out policies, especially this one, because Boris is now suggesting that he is going to put new steel tariffs on EU, especially on EU steel, as well as other countries, China, around the world. And of course, this not only breaks our trade deal with the EU, but it also violates WTO rules as well. And you may remember, for many, many years, the Brexiteers crowed and cried about how good WTO rules were and how wonderful us being in the WTO would be again. Yet here we are, proposing these new tariffs specifically targeted, according to Boris Johnson, to help the northern industry base because he wants to see, you know, protections like the quote European steel industry has. And I say European steel industry, but let's make it very clear. In Europe, you have actual economic strategies, actual economic plans, and your steel industries have benefited from that. Just as we saw in the leveling up reports, the fact that the government has no industrial strategy, has no plan to really help steel industries. And don't get me wrong, the government could, if it wanted to, help the steel industries without these tariffs. There are ways to do it. We've always talked in the past about the decarbonisation of the steel industry. If Boris Johnson were to commit to this plan, a plan that would take at least 20 to 25 years, depending on, of course, how much money Johnson, shall we say, wants to put into it. But of course, Johnson putting money into a project, very unlikely, of course. But if he did actually do this, this would revolutionize our steel industry here in the UK. It would future proof it and ensure that the jobs in those steel industry areas that we have in the UK are protected, not only just for now, but for the long term as well. So there is stuff that Johnson could be doing policy wise to help the steel industry. These tariffs are part, I think, of a massive plan to essentially just go to war with the EU and make it look like, well, Boris is being tough on the EU. Oh, look, these are all the advantages we are doing. Now we're out of the dreaded clutches of Brussels. But of course, this is going to upset the WTO. We're probably going to get dragged through the WTO courts. And of course, sooner or later, I highly receive, just as we've seen articles just this past week saying how we must leave the European Convention on Human Rights. I expect very soon when we get, shall we say, taken to court in the EU and, shall we say, given the slap on the wrist by the WTO courts, expect to see articles about how we must leave this evil World Trade Organization. When just only a couple of years ago, Brexiteers and the right-wing press were championing the WTO as the ultimate place for Britain to be, to do trade and to, well, prosper in the global Britain's new place in the world. But of course, they have no clue, absolutely no clue. And just as it read in the Levelling Up report just a few months ago now, the UK government has no long-term strategy plan for industry, and it continues to have no long-term industry plan. In fact, there are no, at this moment, policy plans in place to help, steel industry or even industry here in the UK, bar Boris Johnson's new crazy plan to, slap on some new tariffs and act all protectionist, which, if you may remember, was something that also the right-wing Brexiteers were heavily against. Oh, we can't be protectionist because that's not free trade. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next